And today, if you look at the operating costs of buildings, every single one of them is going up. There is literally only about one controllable cost in real estate, and it's energy. And if you can move that number down 30%, you're criminally insane at this point not to do it.
Hey everyone, I'm Yotam, the co-founder and CEO at Daisy. Residential real estate is the biggest asset class in the world today, but it's also a place where people live. When you think about a building, it's an entire ecosystem. When people share decisions, they share the budget, they share space together. Daisy, as a modern, customer-centric, end-to-end property management, sits in the interchange of everything that is happening in the building. So we have a really interesting view in how this industry is evolving. And we are interacting today with many companies in this ecosystem that are doing amazing things in order to transform this industry. This episode, we are talking about an area which is very, very interesting in my view, which is emissions and systems and how to control them. And for that, we brought Lee Hoffman, who is the co-founder and CEO of Runwise. We've been running the company for the last 10 years.
A lot less gray hairs back then, yep.
So we'd love to hear first, before we dive into what you guys are doing and how you're disrupting this industry, we'd love first to get to know you.
Yeah.
Maybe you can share a bit about yourself and why you started the company.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. We have a lot of respect for what you guys are doing. I think very similar companies looking at industries that haven't changed for 100 years and saying, hey, if we start from first principles, can this be done better? And we love what you guys are doing at Daisy. My background is in technology. I've been writing code since I was a teenager. This is my sixth startup. And really, this company started because my co-founder was running 150 multifamily buildings in the city for well over a decade and just would see gigantic differences in energy usage between one building and another, sometimes in the order of 90% differences in energy usage per square foot. And that just didn't make sense to him. It seemed very illogical. And what we figured out as we started to dig into it was that the vast majority of buildings, not only in New York, but really in the entire country, are running on technology from the 1960s and 70s. Not just 100-year-old buildings where you expect everything to be old, but even brand new construction. And you look at the control technology that's running millions of dollars of heating, cooling, electric, and it's literally the same control technology that was being used in the 1960s and 70s. The software is hard-coded onto the control, so it never gets smarter. Your iPhone gets updated every night and smarter, and this control is never updating. It has no indoor sensors, so it has no idea what's happening in the building, who's there, what the temperature is, nothing. And it's not connected to the internet. Nobody understands the system, so they just assume if the building is running, everything is running well. They don't realize that 30% of their energy might be wasted, that there might be critical issues happening that they could have detected years before.
What is your technology actually brings into the table that makes it more efficient?
We use sensors throughout buildings to run the core systems like heating systems, cooling systems, electric systems, in a much more intelligent and much more efficient way. So I'll give you an example. If you've ever been into, let's use the simplest example, an old school building with radiators, right? And you walk down the street in the middle of February and look at that building in New York City, it's 20 degrees outside, you will see a dozen windows that are open. Right? We all know this. We've all been in the city. We've all been in one of those apartments like 90 degrees in the middle of February. And you're like, why is this? And nobody ever thinks about it.
Literally, I think a week ago, I was opening the window here because it
was like 1,000,000 degrees. And the reason is that there is literally a device from the 70s that is effectively a timer. And it has a knob and you can turn it up or down. And somebody complained 10 years ago and the building manager didn't know what to do, has no idea what's happening in the apartment, so he turns the knob up. And now the building's running at 80 degrees. And what happens when the building's too hot? You open the windows and nobody complains anymore. If the building's too cold, you get lots of complaints. So without using sensors, without using smart software, you always vastly overshoot, both on heating, both on cooling, electric. You also have problems that go on in the system that nobody knows about for years that potentially can harm people. And these things just go completely unnoticed because day to day, the building is heated or cooled and you assumed everything is working. But really, it's really running in an unintelligent way.
So the idea is you basically add more sensors across the building, right? And then you can actually understand and assess the right temperature.
Correct.
But then it affects the boiler, right? So it's
Correct.
automatically adjusting the boiler, right?
Yep.
And
So it's
the
adjusting the
cooling, yeah.
heating system or the cooling system. We're just adjusting the things in a much more precise way. And most people think one temperature is the perfect temperature for inside. My apartment should run at 74 degrees. What we've actually shown is that what people perceive as the optimal temperature changes all the time.
Yeah.
So I'll give this example I always use. When it's October, November, and that first cold day comes, it's like 52 degrees, right? You're like, it's the Arctic outside. You're wearing like 20 layers, right? And then it's 52 degrees in March or April after a deep cold winter, and you're like, I could be outside in my bathing suit.
Yeah.
It's like so warm, right? We adjust. And so you actually need to change the temperature of the building different times of the day, different times of the
Yeah.
year, et cetera. And all of that can save a lot of energy because 1 degree of temperature in a building could be 10% of your energy usage. That's a lot of money, and it's a lot of carbon emissions going out the window,
Yeah, I
literally.
can also say from our side,
Yeah.
we have about close to 2,000 tickets open every month right now across all our portfolio.
Yeah.
And the majority of those are around maintenance, physical
Yep.
maintenance. And the majority of those are usually around heating,
Heat.
cooling.
Correct.
And I remember actually last winter, which is, I think, another value proposition you guys offer today is like, we had some buildings that was, too cold, and you can actually control it, right?
Correct.
From a centralized system as opposed to needing to send someone to adjust the temperature, right?
Yep. I mean, we all know, like, you can order a pizza and you know where the pizza is,
Yeah.
like, in real time, and yet the thing that's controlling heat, a critical thing for a building for safety, literally nobody has any idea what's happening and can't do anything unless they go to the basement and physically look at the thing. I mean, it's like insanity. And that is how 99% of buildings run in New York City and the country.
And how do you see, like, I guess you guys collect also a lot of data points
Yeah.
today, right? So how do you guys use that in order to, to improve the experience for people?
I think one of the core things that we did, obviously beyond saving buildings a lot of energy and making it a lot easier to manage those buildings, is that we actually tried to make this industry transparent. For 20 years, there have been people making promises about this window film, these windows, this roofing, this control, this will save you money, right? And I can tell you probably on one hand how many people have ever installed one of these things and then figured out how much they actually
Yeah.
saved afterwards. Because once it's installed and people have collected their money, they disappear, right? And we thought that was just the wrong approach. We're now in 7,500 buildings, so we had a lot of data. And we said, you know what, we should really change how this is done and make it transparent. Even if we fail in a building and we waste money, let's say something goes terribly
And you
wrong.
had that in one building?
Of course, we're in 7,500 buildings, things go wrong,
Yeah.
right? But we've done it so many times that we know in that almost every case we will save money. And even when we don't, we want to know about it quickly. We don't want to know about it 2 years later when somebody decides to randomly check, oh, how did my energy bills pan out? So we ingest all of the energy bills. We calculate the savings year over year, month by month, day by day. So when you go onto our app, not only can you make adjustments and see everything that's happening, you can see in real time how much have you saved, not only that day, that week, that month, but cumulatively over time. And if something isn't going right, we want to fix it and get ahead of it quickly so it will go right.
I think you touched a key point in my view in this industry, basically transparency, right? I think you see that in industries where you bring in technology and how technology can actually create that transparency around, the job that you need to do, right? You saw it in so many other industries. And when you have that transparency, even if in the end, like you're not getting the right service, but at least you know what's going on, then, your experience as a consumer is becoming, 10x better. I think there was one research I just saw a few weeks ago on the subway system, that people actually preferred the subway to arrive later if they know how much time they need to wait.
Yeah.
Right? And this transparency is something, in my view at least, that this industry really lacks, because it's not based on technology, based mainly on people communicating, pen and paper, emails, phone calls. And when you incorporate technology in everything that you're doing, you're able to give that transparency to the customer. And then you can actually build that trust.
100%. If you can't measure it, you can't fix it, right? And I think what you guys are doing at Daisy, your central mission is to use technology to bring transparency to one of the most opaque industries, right? And you're doing it from one side of the house, which is the personnel and the direct management. We're doing it from the physical side of the house, which is what's actually happening in your building. How do we make it better? How do we fix it? How do we make sure problems get diagnosed? And you know exactly how everybody and everything performs.
I saw this reluctant to change, right? You come to buildings, You want
It's
to,
actually the
you
nature in
basically,
general.
exactly, you want to convince them that there is a better way of running a building.
You
Again, it's
know
just a,
firsthand, getting anybody to change in real estate is extremely hard. It's why the industry is 30 years behind every other industry, right? You go to like, you look at Walmart, they've had real-time inventory for 30 years, and we have no real-time systems in any buildings in the
yeah.
United States, right? I mean, it's crazy. I think what you probably figured out, what you guys figured out as well, we figured out, which is we basically go in and we say, here are the results we're going to deliver. We are going to cut your energy bills by 30%. The system is going to pay for itself in 5 months. We're going to diagnose these issues quickly. We're going to make your life a lot easier. And then we said, we'll prove it and we're going to show it to you. And if we don't, you'll kick us out after a year and there's nothing binding you to us. And I think that level of transparency and kind of reduction of risk is really what's helped us.
So looking back at the last 10 years, what are the things I would say you're most proud of?
I think we call it kind of the win-win outcome, which is we're in about 7,500 buildings now. So like if you walk down the streets of any major city in Manhattan, like every block has 5
In
or
New
10 of our
York
buildings
or
across the country. And when you aggregate we have all the energy bills for all those buildings. So you actually know how much money you were able to save, what the carbon reduction is, et cetera. And what you see is that this year, we're going to come to about $100 million in cumulative savings for those buildings.
wow,
So it's a lot of money saved,
a lot of
which
money.
is great, right? And you think bottom line, that's great. But at the same time, we're also been able to remove so much carbon that we've taken the equivalent of 100,000 cars of carbon off the road at the same time. So it's not only good for budgets and the bottom line, it's also good for the planet. And I think being able to have that win-win in everything you do is probably one of the things I'm generally most happy and proud of.
I couldn't agree with that more. It's something we discuss here at Daisy a lot because in the end, a building is an ecosystem on its own. And when you connect everybody together, you create like this one holistic demand for any consumption of services. When on the other hand, you have vendors that want to actually provide service, then you can actually create that win-win factor, which is great for vendors, it's great for the building. And now when you add on top of it a network of buildings, now you can actually create even more value, which is basically win-win for everyone. Couldn't agree with that more.
Yep.
How did you see the last 10 years, the evolution of real estate, residential real estate, or real estate as a whole, in terms of adopting technology, in terms of focusing on experience of living? I saw some changes throughout the last 5 years, but interesting to hear your perspective on it.
I think there are a couple of major changes. And the first is that real estate used to be, I don't want to say easy, but so profitable because of low interest rates and appreciation of properties that a lot of the industry had gotten, like a little bit lazy, right? And I'm not saying the people are lazy, just you had a business model. You would buy a building or inherit some buildings, you'd refinance them X years later, you'd pull a ton of cash out, and whatever happened in between happened. It was not that big of a deal. Now, it's not so easy, right? Most buildings are not in good financial shape. And you can't just say, well, whatever I did for the last 50 years will work for the next 50. It is, you better do something different. Otherwise, you're going to lose your buildings. And I think that change of state has really opened a lot of operators, owners, and managers up to new ideas and new technology, whereas previously it was just easier to ignore it because it required thought and work. And today, if you look at the operating costs of buildings, every single one of them is going up. I mean, you see this in your co-op board budgets, right? Labor's going up, insurance is going up, real estate taxes are going up, interest costs skyrocketing, right? Compliance costs skyrocketing. And yet rents have not gone up, right? And so the revenue is static, the costs are up, and that just puts buildings in a bind. Incomes haven't gone up. So even in co-ops and condos, people are not making as much as the costs are going up. There is literally only about one controllable cost in real estate, and it's energy.
Yeah.
And if you can move that number down 30%, you're criminally insane at this point not to do it.
Yeah, the way I saw it, I think there are two parts to it. One is exactly what you're referring to, which is the efficiency, right?
Yes.
How can you use technology today, with the era of generative AI and other technology that is out there to make the processes more efficient, to save costs. I think there is another pillar that, at least I saw in the past years, which is the experience, right? The consumer experience. I think when we think about other industries, from the way we commute, from the way we order our food, those industries completely transformed. But somehow this industry of real estate is kind of like stuck a bit in the 90s, if I need to say sometimes. It feels like that. And I think that people expect more today. You
Yep.
expect the ability to interact in your smartphone. You expect your ability to understand what's going on, to
Yep.
get updates. And this industry is kind of like stuck in the way that you send an email, you wait 4 days, maybe somebody will
Yep.
answer, you hope someone will answer.
Right.
There's so much documents. Like when we are replacing
Yep.
another management, we get boxes of paper that we need to go over. And it feels to me like this also affects in the end the transition of this industry. I think landlords and boards understand that there is an element of experience. In the end, these are people's home, right?
Yep.
That's where they live.
Yep.
They spend so much time paying their common charges or their rent. Like
Yep.
it's the biggest cost you have. It's the biggest value that you have.
Yep.
And I think people start to expect more as well.
I think that's absolutely right on. And just like there was pressure from the finances on the cost side, there's pressure on the other side, which is the experience side. And I think it's driven by exactly what you're saying. 10 years ago, you wanted to live in the West Village, you were probably bidding with 50 other people on the condo or co-op and praying that your bid was accepted for the apartment. Now, there's not a lot of buyers out there, right? Interest rates are high, apartments are expensive. You have to provide a great experience if you want people to not only buy in your building, but also stay in your building, right? And I think that's the other flip side of it, where as you might have been able to get away with not looking at technology 5 or 10 years ago, now, if you want your building to be competitive, you want your property values to stay high, and you want to have good retention in your building, you better be using technology.
You want to have the right temperature in your apartment without needing to open your window.
Exactly,
Right?
exactly.
Which is the basic of the Maslow pyramid, which is just have the right heating.
Most fundamental. Am I freezing or sweating in my apartment? Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. And when you think, okay, 10 years, like when Runwise went, how do your roadmap, things that you guys are releasing, how do you see it going forward? Are you guys using any AI, generative AI?
We've been using prediction models for years. Everything from what should the temperature be at this exact moment, and if we can shave degrees off, that could be tens of thousands of dollars a year in energy costs, reduction of carbon, et cetera. So that's something that we've always been using. I think our focus right now is we started with heating, and we see the same problems that we had in heating in every other system in the building, from heating to cooling to electric to water. There's a bunch of local laws coming about natural gas detection that is going to cause an apocalypse in New York City of gas shutoffs when those things go in. How do you make that better? How do you make that smarter?
So you guys doing that?
So we are launching a whole suite of new things to basically run every aspect of your
more
building
sensors
smarter.
on different
More
systems.
sensors, and just the idea is very simple. If you have one building or 100 buildings, all of your systems should be run optimally and intelligently and make your building easier and safer to run. And it should all be done in one app and one product. And that platform, that service is basically becoming the operating system of buildings. When you open up your Mac computer, you see the Mac operating system. When you run your building, you want one platform that you know is going to run every system intelligently and make sure your building is running in a safe and effective way.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, right? In the end, it needs to be one system. I think that's what people are missing. In the end, there is a resident living in the building, and they have, heating, they have also yoga on the roof. Everything should live in one system, and then you can actually make things much more efficient and to improve the experience of the world. How do you envision buildings of the future? I would say 10 years from now, how do you think buildings will operate?
There's this interesting stat that these researchers released in the last year, which was they showed that cities are actually, on a per capita basis, the cleanest places to live in the world.
Really?
Yeah. So like if you look at the carbon map on a per person basis of New York City versus the surrounding suburbs per person, right? Yeah. So density really matters, but still it still means something, because like if you can actually reduce the carbon footprint on a per person basis, you're reducing the carbon footprint of a country, right? And I think that
how much did you guys reduce? I don't know, until now. You have a number? Or?
Yeah, I mean, the average building we touch reduces its carbon footprint by about 21%.
Okay.
We've taken, this year alone, we'll take the equivalent of 100,000 cars of carbon output off the road. Wow. So like, it's like New York City just removed 100,000 a year. So huge, huge carbon reduction. I think simply using the right technology in buildings, you can make cities the most affordable, the cleanest, the healthiest, and the most enjoyable places to live. And I think that's really what we focus on. How do you use technology to do that? And the way you start is where people spend most of their time, which is in buildings,
Yeah.
either to work or live.
Yeah, and I think the city is also pushing to that direction with new
Correct.
legislation, right? So
Correct.
Local Law 97 is big here, of course, in
Yep.
all our buildings as well. And I know that other cities are going in the same direction.
Correct. You look at everybody thinks that that carbon comes from cars, right? And it does, but more carbon in cities, about 60% of the carbon comes from buildings,
Yeah.
right? So there's a reason why every city is passing legislation, not about cars, they're passing about buildings. It's because that is where carbon is coming from. And if you can attack that, there's a good 30 to 40% of that can be reduced just simply through using better technology.
And making buildings more healthy.
And making buildings more healthy, nicer places to live, more comfortable, safer, and more affordable. If you can cut the cost of living in buildings, the elasticity of real estate is not very high in New York. You cut the costs, it gets passed down to the cost of living.
Cool. I want to end up with the last question, which we ask in every episode is, what do you think makes a building an amazing place to live in?
I think that's a great question. Wow. It's a really good question.
So you need to choose a building.
Yeah.
What are the parameters you will look at that you'll tell you, okay, this is a place I want to live?
Okay, so I'm going to say a controversial statement, which is I think it's actually the community of a building that makes the building an amazing place to live. And that community comes from not only how lovely the building is to operate, where the building is, but it also comes from the staff. It comes from how much the staff enjoy doing their work or hate doing their work.
Yeah.
It comes from the management. All of these things tie together and create an experience that I think can either be kind of negative or overtly positive. I live in a building, my in-laws live there. I live there with my wife and my daughter. We have 3 generations in the building.
Wow.
There's like 12 families like that in the building because it's an amazing, it's a place to
So
live.
they can
It's
just
great.
go.
We just go, babysitting is great, let me tell you. But it's because it's a great place to live, right?
Yeah.
And that comes from staff that really, I think, are not only phenomenal, but love their job. Staff that's intelligent, uses the right technology to make the building easier to manage, a more comfortable place to live. It's safe. You know that you're not going to have problems. All these things tie together to create a great place to live. And I think if you do that, if you can deliver that more scalably to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of buildings around the country, you just make the country a better place to live and work. And I think that's really a goal that we can all strive for.
It's amazing. I think we'll end with this statement. Lee, thank you very, very much for coming and joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been great to be here.
Thank you.
Awesome.